Good morning, everyone. Last time we started with a new grammar lesson entitled Adjective Clauses. Today I will continue this chapter by focusing on two relative pronouns that are used at the beginning of an adjective clause, which are called whom and which. But before I start talking about whom and which, let me remind you of what an adjective clause is. An adjective clause is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb. It immediately follows the noun it modifies or describes. An adjective clause is a dependent clause. As you all noticed in the following definition, that an adjective clause always has one subject and one verb, it immediately comes after the noun it modifies. In addition, an adjective clause is not a complete sentence since it doesn't have or carry a full meaning. Using whom in adjective clauses, whom is a relative pronoun that replaces object pronouns that refer to people such as me, you, him, her, us, and them. Such pronouns can be objects of verbs or objects of prepositions. As you all know, that every word which follows or comes after a verb is called an object of a verb, and every word that follows a preposition is considered an object of preposition. Here is an example on an object of a verb. The people were very hospitable. We visited them yesterday. If you look at this example, you will have two independent clauses. This means two complete sentences. In the first clause, the noun people functions as the subject. In the second clause, them is an object pronoun that refers to the subject people. It should be omitted from the adjective clause and replaced by whom. To avoid repetition, we should use suitable pronouns to replace some antecedents or nouns. And the noun or subject people will be modified by an adjective clause. The people whom we visited yesterday were very hospitable. Whom we visited yesterday, this underlined part, is called an adjective clause that modifies the subject people. And as I said, whom always replaces object pronouns. So whom here in this adjective clause is the object, which is always followed by a subject. We is the subject of the adjective clause. Visited is the verb. I stopped at yesterday because where is another verb that shouldn't be included in this adjective clause. As I said before, an adjective clause should include one verb. An example on an object of preposition. The man was a factory worker, the novelist wrote about him. Here also there are two independent clauses. The word man in the first clause functions as the subject. In the second clause, him refers to man and it's an object of preposition about. So it should be omitted from the adjective clause and replaced by whom. And the subject man will be modified by an adjective clause. The man whom the novelist wrote about was a factory worker. Whom the novelist wrote about is an adjective clause describing the subject man. Whom, as I said, is the object. The novelist is the subject of this adjective clause, and wrote is the verb. I stopped at about because was is another verb that shouldn't be included in this adjective clause. Omitting whom from adjective clauses. Since whom replaces object pronouns, it can be omitted from adjective clauses. Example, the girl is my best friend. I told you about her last night. Here also there are two independent clauses. In the first clause, the noun girl functions as the subject of the sentence. In the second clause, we have an object pronoun which is her. It refers to the subject girl. It should be omitted from the adjective clause and replaced by whom. Whom here also may be omitted because, as I said, it replaces object pronouns, and whether I include it or not, this doesn't affect the meaning. The girl I told you about last night is my best friend. I told you about last night. This underlined part is an adjective clause describing the subject girl. As you noticed here, I omitted whom. I is the subject of the adjective clause and told is the verb. I stopped at last night because is another verb which shouldn't be included in this adjective clause. Now, using which in adjective clauses, which is a relative pronoun that replaces things or animals that are either subjects or objects. An example on using which as the subject of an adjective clause. The river is polluted. It flows through the town. Also here we have two independent clauses. In the first clause, the noun river functions as the subject of the sentence. In the second clause, we started with a personal pronoun it. It functions as a subject pronoun and it refers to the noun river. It should be omitted from the adjective clause and replaced by which. The river is the subject that is modified here in this adjective clause. The river which flows through the town is polluted. This underlined part is an adjective clause modifying the subject river. Which is the subject of the adjective clause. Flows is the verb. I stopped at the town, since is another verb which shouldn't be included here. I want to tell you something important. Which here is the subject of the adjective clause since it's followed immediately by a verb. So when we have a verb after which, then it's a subject of the adjective clause. An example on using which as an object in the adjective clause. The books were expensive. I bought them yesterday. In the first clause, the noun books functions as the subject. In the second clause, we have them, which functions as an object of the verb bought, and it refers to the subject books. Them should be omitted from the adjective clause and replaced by which. So which here functions as the object, not the subject. The books which I bought yesterday were expensive. Which here is the object, as I said, because it's followed by the subject I. And we have a verb bought. I stopped at yesterday because where is another verb that shouldn't be included in this adjective clause. Omitting which from adjective clause. Which can only be omitted from an adjective clause if it replaces the object pronoun. It's like whom. An example on omitting which used as an object in the adjective clause. Here, pay attention that when which functions as the subject of the adjective clause, it cannot be omitted. And I told you how you will know this. There is a clue word here. If which is followed by a verb, then it's the subject that cannot be omitted from the adjective clause. If which is followed by a subject, then it's an object that can be omitted from an adjective clause. An example, the food was delicious. We ate it at the sidewalk cafe. As you noticed here, the noun food here functions as the subject of the first clause. In the second clause, we have an object pronoun it. It refers to the subject food, and as you noticed, since it follows the verb ate, then it's an object pronoun that should be omitted from the adjective clause and replaced by which. And here which is also omitted because it functions as the object, not as the subject. The food we ate at the sidewalk cafe was delicious. We ate at the sidewalk cafe is an adjective clause modifying food. We here is the subject of the adjective clause and ate is the verb. I omitted which here because it's an object, and I stopped at cafe because was is another verb that shouldn't be included in this adjective clause. Let's do this exercise together. Change each pair of the following sentences into one by using the second as an adjective clause. The hat is unusual. Tom is wearing it. Here we have two independent clauses. In the first clause, we have the noun hat. It functions as the subject of the first clause. In the second clause, we have it. It is an object pronoun since it follows the verb is wearing and it refers to the subject hat. So the subject hat will be modified by an adjective clause, and it should be omitted from the adjective clause and replaced by which. The hat which Tom is wearing is unusual. So here which, as you noticed, functions as an object since it's followed by the subject Tom, and is wearing is the verb. I have to stop before the second verb is because is shouldn't be included in this adjective clause. Let's omit which here since it's the object. The hat Tom is wearing is unusual. Here, as you noticed, omitting which doesn't affect the meaning since which functions as the object. It can be omitted from the adjective clause. Tom is the subject and is wearing is the verb. Number 2, that is the woman, the people elected her. As you noticed here, in the first clause, the word woman functions as the subject, and in the second clause, we have an object pronoun her. It refers to the noun woman or subject woman. Her should be omitted from the adjective clause and replaced by whom. So the woman, that is the woman whom the people elected. So whom the people elected is an adjective clause modifying or describing the subject woman. Your assignment for next time is to do exercises 10, 11, and 12 on page 325 and exercises 16, 17, 18, and 19 on pages 328 and 329 in the grammar book. Thank you for listening.